What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another video. Today we're checking out Gulf War from Iraq's perspective, featuring Emperor Tiger Star animated mini documentary. This is from the Armchair Historian. I've heard of this channel and I'm sure it has a lot of great content. This was a suggestion. You'll see them on the screen right now. Be sure to get your suggestions in the comments below if you want to suggest me anything to watch, and subscribe so you never miss a video. Obviously you have to click the bell if you want to get notifications to actually never miss a video, but you don't have to do that.
Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the Armchair Historian. Today's video, the Persian Gulf War from the Iraqi perspective.
I need to sound like this.
Joining me to help narrate is Emperor Tiger Star. Be sure to subscribe to his YouTube channel and watch his map video on the same topic. Silhouetted by the flames of hundreds of burning oil wells, the shattered remnants of the Iraqi army make their way north along Highway 80 toward Basra. Vehicles of all kinds, from tanks to technicals, clog the road, forcing swarms of Iraqi soldiers to weave their way through the traffic on foot. Demoralized, hungry, and exhausted, they have barely escaped Kuwait with their lives. Above them, however, an American AC-130 orbits the area like a bird of prey.
Roger, those are Iraqi vehicles.
The only reason I know
only now do they realize they may not have truly escaped safely.
Firing.
This guy has a very unique channel, and his animations are very different. You know, like from Oversimplified, we've done Future History, and a lot of these history channels. This guy seems very
Before
unique.
we continue, let's turn the clock back 7 months. On August 2nd, 1990, Iraqi forces, acting under the direction of President Saddam Hussein, crossed the border into Kuwait. You might be asking yourself why Saddam invaded such a seemingly trivial country. The answer lies mostly in Saddam's own poor decisions, namely the protracted Iran-Iraq War, which had exhausted Iraq's economy and forced the country to take out billions of dollars worth of loans from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Unable to repay, Saddam asked Kuwait to forgive the debt. They refused.
Oh man knows how to take revenge. They will avenge the pure blood that has been shed, no matter how
to
long
exacerbate matters, Kuwait was exporting more oil than it was allowed to as a member of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. By June of 1990, the price per barrel had plunged to around $17, costing Iraq billions of dollars in oil revenue. Around this time, Iraq also publicly accused Kuwait of illegally drilling under the border and siphoning oil from them. Predictably, Kuwait and the foreign firms working in the area dismissed the claims. This alleged theft of Iraqi oil was a major catalyst, at least officially, for the invasion that occurred 1 year later. In addition to the aforementioned oil dispute, Saddam also invoked Iraq's traditional territorial claim to Kuwait, arguing that the country was merely a product of British imperialism. In 1922, British High Commissioner of Mesopotamia, Sir Percy Cox, had unilaterally set the boundaries between Iraq, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, and in the process, he gave away most of Iraq's coastline. Although Iraq was unhappy with this arrangement, the issue of Kuwaiti sovereignty lay largely dormant until the start of the Gulf War. With all of these grievances, it was only a matter of time before war broke out. For his invasion, Saddam mobilized 100,000 of his best troops. In contrast, the Kuwait army consisted of only 16,000 soldiers, and many were on leave at the time of the attack. The element of surprise ensured that effective Kuwaiti resistance ended within just 12 hours, after which Saddam triumphantly proclaimed that Kuwait was now the 19th province of Iraq. Although his army was in good shape and could have easily continued into Saudi Arabia and seized its valuable oil fields, Saddam abruptly gave the order to halt. For now, conquering Kuwait was enough, as he had shown the rest of the world that Iraq had become the preeminent power in the Middle East. Nonetheless, Iraq was not the preeminent power in the world, and it wouldn't be long before the major powers intervened on behalf of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. In anticipation of this, Saddam employed as many as 600,000 soldiers to Iraq's southern border over a period of 6 months. Within the same time frame, the American-led coalition assembled nearly 1 million personnel on the other side of the Saudi border as part of what was called Operation Desert Shield. During the preparation phase, the Iraqis decided on a strategy of protraction, seeking to turn the upcoming showdown into another Vietnam. They would prolong the conflict to turn the American public against the war and dictate the decision-making process of President George H.W. Bush's administration.
Blood and oil, we will chase Americans to every corner at all times. No high tower or steel will protect them against
From a military standpoint, the Iraqis grossly underestimated the advances in technology since the Vietnam War, and did not consider that many of their Soviet-made tanks, most notably the T-72, were obsolete against the vastly superior American M1 Abrams. Even worse, they failed to correctly predict the nature of the war. According to Norman Segar, a research fellow at the Marine Corps University,
Saddam assumed that much of the fighting would occur at close range, so the coalition advantage in long-range weapons, optics, and electronics would not matter.
Meanwhile, there was a mass exodus from densely populated areas as ordinary Iraqis raced to escape the impending hostilities. Yet, as late as January 16, 1991, there were still people lingering in Baghdad. For those that remained, life continued with some semblance of normalcy, even if it was plagued with an uncomfortable tension. Pulitzer Prize-winning author Rick Atkinson describes the situation in Baghdad on the eve of war.
Save for an occasional vendor peddling oranges and dates, Baghdad's souks or bazaars lay empty. Shops which in recent months had been overflowing with spoils of war, from Rolex watches to Armani shoes, were now shuttered and padlocked.
That night, January 16, 1991, the coalition launched a massive air campaign marking the start of Operation Desert Storm. The bombardment was directed at both tactical targets, such as radar stations, and strategic targets, such as infrastructure and electricity. Surrounded by the explosions of bombs and missiles, and with the nation's air defense systems completely worthless against the coalition's overwhelming air power, the residents of Baghdad steeled themselves for what would be the most trying period of their lives up until that point. Over the next 6 weeks, Iraq's infrastructure and military were devastated, paving the way for an eventual ground campaign. By mid-February, Baghdad was in disarray. According to Atkinson,
the war had reduced the city to 19th century privation. Basic services like running water, electricity, telephone service, and garbage collection were no longer functioning, and gasoline was in short supply.
In short, the air campaign profoundly affected the quality of life in the nation's capital. On February 24, 1991, the coalition launched the ground phase of Operation Desert Storm, which consisted of a two-pronged assault into Kuwait and southeastern Iraq. Outgunned and outmaneuvered, Iraqi opposition rapidly folded. During their advance, the coalition took huge numbers of Iraqis prisoner. Most of them were young men who had been drafted into the military. By the 26th, only 2 days into the ground offensive, coalition forces had broken 26 of 43 Iraqi divisions in Kuwait. Knocked off balance by the speed of the coalition's advance, the Iraqis activated their contingency plan, which involved withdrawing from Kuwait and destroying as much infrastructure as they possibly could in the process. As they retreated, Iraqi forces torched over 600 oil wells, some of which continued to burn for months. However, before untold thousands of Iraqis could completely withdraw, the coalition managed to cut off a portion of their retreat. It didn't help that there was a bottleneck on the main road. Specifically, Highway 80 leading out of Kuwait City gained the nickname of the Highway of Death because of the sheer numbers of vehicles destroyed by coalition aircraft on the night of the 26th. The death toll is estimated to be around 1,000, with approximately 2,000 captured. However, up to 80,000 Iraqi soldiers may have escaped the trap. At this point, only a handful of Saddam's elite Republican Guard divisions stood between coalition forces and complete victory, and in spite of their much vaunted fighting ability, they were no match for the fast-moving American armored columns. On February 27th, American forces destroyed over 150 Iraqi tanks and armored vehicles in the Battle of 73 Easton at the cost of only one Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. That same day, American and British units destroyed 1,000 Iraqi vehicles at the battles of Norfolk and Medina Ridge. Although President Bush announced a ceasefire on February 28th, sporadic fighting continued for another week. Specifically, near the Rumaila oil field, Iraqi forces offered token resistance as coalition forces swiftly closed in. Around this time, Iraq decided to sue for peace. On March 3, 1991, 6 weeks into Operation Desert Storm, the two sides met at Safwan, Iraq, where they formally agreed to a ceasefire. All told, Iraq suffered 20,000 killed, 75,000 wounded, and 80,000 captured during the Gulf War. In contrast, Kuwait experienced 16,000 casualties, and coalition losses were just over 1,000, many of which were, surprisingly, due to friendly fire. The war did not oust Saddam's regime. It was feared that carrying the attack to Baghdad would have made America look like the aggressor, and the United Nations Council only enforced an Iraqi withdrawal from Kuwait and imposed economic sanctions on Saddam's government. Moreover, the US wanted Iraq to have enough military capacity to quash Kurdish and Shia uprisings, which could have been detrimental to its allies in the region like Turkey and the Gulf states. Indeed, when rebellions broke out in Iraq after the end of hostilities, the US did not intervene. To thank God for the longevity of his regime, Saddam commissioned the creation of the Blood Quran. Supposedly, it was written with 27 liters of his own blood, possibly more to correct spelling mistakes. Whatever the case, Saddam was sanguine about his prospects despite the crippling economic sanctions and infrastructural damage sustained as a result of the war. Ultimately, Saddam defied the Western powers and their allies for 12 years after the end of the Gulf War, until another American-led coalition finally toppled his regime in 2003. Now I want to thank our sponsor, Squarespace. Whether you're looking...
Okay, that's the end of that. You guys know I don't talk too much during these videos just because we want to listen and we'll talk about it after. So, we've done one video on this before, and in terms of this war was obviously... in terms of the Iraqis, they had no match for the Western powers. Like he said, their army was obviously nowhere near as big. They also didn't have the equipment or the weapons to fight, but Saddam wanted them to, and he wasn't a great leader in terms of military. He didn't really know too much, and in terms of other dictators who have done similar things in the past, he didn't have the military experience or the military know-how that some of them did, which really... and the military size, like if you think of Germany and Hitler, he had a much bigger military, a much bigger population, and he was much smarter in terms of how he done it, whereas Saddam Hussein, he didn't really have any military experience. At this point, the other world powers weren't going to let anything similar to what Hitler done happen again. But yeah, you guys let me know what your thoughts, suggest videos in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time. Oh yeah, I forgot to say subscribe. Now I'll see you all next time.